The cowboy raised his rifle. Not at the woman, at the three men behind her. "Touch them," he said, voice low as gravel, "and I'll put you in the ground." The mother dropped to her knees. Her children, three of them, filthy barefoot, shaking, pressed into her like she was the last solid thing in the world. She didn't know this man, didn't know his name, his past, or why he was standing between her family and the men who wanted to drag them back to hell. But 12 hours ago, none of this had happened yet. If you want to know how a stranger became the only man willing to fight for a woman and 3 children he'd never met, stay with me until the end. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Ruth Calloway hadn't slept in 3 days. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, not since she'd grabbed the kitchen knife and put it between herself and the man blocking her front door. Not since she'd looked her dead husband's killer in the eye and said, "You'll have to drag me out." He almost did, but she'd cut him, across the forearm, deep enough to make him bleed, deep enough to make him stumble back. And in that 1 second, that one breath of open air, she grabbed her children and ran. That was 3 days ago. Now she was walking through open prairie with nothing but the clothes on her back, a canteen with maybe 2 swallows left, and 3 children who were running out of reasons to believe their mama knew what she was doing. Jacob walked ahead, 12 years old, quiet, his father's hunting knife strapped to his belt with a piece of rope because the sheath had broken 2 days back. He hadn't spoken since yesterday morning. Not since he'd asked where they were going, and Ruth had no answer. Lily was 8. She walked beside Ruth, holding baby Henry's hand when he'd let her, and carrying him when he wouldn't walk. She hummed, soft, barely there, the same song Ruth used to sing at bedtime. Ruth realized Lily was doing it to keep herself from crying. And Henry, 4 years old, too young to understand why Papa wasn't coming back. Too young to understand why they were walking through dust and heat with no food and no water and no place to go. He'd stopped asking questions yesterday. That scared Ruth more than anything. "Mama." Jacob had stopped. He was pointing east. "Someone's coming." Ruth's blood went cold. She pulled the children behind her and reached for the knife in her boot. The same knife. Still had dried blood on it. "Get behind me, all of you." "Mama, I can—" "Jacob, behind me, now." The dust cloud grew. A rider, 1 horse, moving fast. Ruth's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. If it was one of Briggs's men she'd fight. She'd lose, but she'd fight. She'd buy the children time to run. But the rider passed, didn't even look their way. Just a cowboy heading somewhere that wasn't here. Ruth let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her legs buckled. She caught herself on her knees and pressed her palms into the dirt. "Mama." Lily's voice was small. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby." She wasn't fine. She was dehydrated, starving, and her feet had been bleeding since yesterday afternoon. The left boot had a hole straight through the sole. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. But she stood. Because that's what mothers do. "Come on. We keep moving." "Where?" Jacob asked. Not mean. Just tired. Just honest. Ruth looked at the horizon. Flat, empty, endless. Forward. It started 6 weeks ago. Daniel Calloway had been a saddle maker, best in the territory. His shop sat on the corner of Main and Prescott in the town of Elk Crossing, Montana. Small town. 30 families, maybe 40. The kind of place where everyone knew your name, and half of them owed you a favor. Daniel was a quiet man. Didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't raise his voice. He built saddles with the same hands he used to carve wooden horses for Henry and braid Lily's hair on Sunday mornings. He was also stubborn, and that's what killed him. Harlan Briggs wanted the shop. Not because he needed saddles, because the shop sat on water rights. The creek that ran behind Daniel's property fed half the valley. Control that creek and you controlled every ranch within 10 miles. Briggs offered to buy. Daniel said no. Briggs offered more. Daniel said no again. Then Briggs stopped asking. They found Daniel on the road outside town. His horse had spooked, they said. Threw him into a ravine, broke his neck. The sheriff, a man named Polk, who owed Briggs his badge, ruled it an accident. Case closed. Sorry for your loss, Mrs. Calloway. Ruth knew it was a lie. She knew because Daniel Calloway had been riding horses since he was 6 years old. She knew because Daniel's saddle, the one he built himself, the one that fit his mare like a glove, had its girth strap cut clean through. She knew because the night before he died, Daniel sat her down at the kitchen table and said something she'd never forget. Ruth, if something happens to me, take the ledger. What ledger? He pulled it from beneath a floorboard, small leather bound filled with his careful handwriting. Every deal Briggs has made, every family he's cheated, every contract he's forged, I've been writing it all down for 2 years. Daniel, if something happens, he said again firm, you take the children, you take this book, and you get as far from Elk Crossing as your legs will carry you. She thought he was being dramatic. She told him to come to bed. 3 days later, he was dead. The first week after the funeral, the town was kind. Casseroles on the porch, whispered condolences at the general store. The preacher prayed for Daniel's soul on Sunday. By week 2, the kindness dried up. By week 3, Briggs came. He knocked on her door at supper time, hat in hand, smiling that smile that never reached his eyes. Mrs. Calloway, my deepest sympathies. Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Now please leave. He didn't leave. I understand Daniel had some debts. The shop, the property taxes. Daniel had no debts. Briggs tilted his head. That's not what the records show. I've spoken to the bank. Your husband owed $400 in back taxes on the property. Now, I'm a reasonable man. You're a liar. Daniel paid those taxes in January. I watched him do it. Something shifted in Briggs's face. The smile stayed, but the warmth, whatever imitation of warmth had been there, vanished. Mrs. Calloway, you're a woman alone with 3 children. I'm offering to help. I'll buy the property, clear the debt, and give you enough to start over somewhere else. That's generous. Get off my porch. He put his hat back on, straightened it slow. You've got 1 week to reconsider. He sent Pike on day 3. Pike was Briggs's shadow, tall, lean face like a hatchet. He'd served under Briggs in the war and never quite came home from it. He did what Briggs told him, no questions, no hesitation. Pike didn't knock. He walked in. Ruth was washing dishes. The children were in the back room. She heard his boots on the floor and spun around a plate still in her hand. Who are you? Get out of my house. Name's Pike, ma'am. Mr. Briggs sent me. He looked around the kitchen, touched the curtains, ran his finger along the shelf. Nice place, real homey. I said get out. Here's the thing, Mrs. Calloway. He sat in Daniel's chair. Ruth's stomach turned. Mr. Briggs owns this property now. Bank transferred the deed this morning. Back taxes and all. That's not possible. Got the papers right here. He tapped his coat pocket. You and the little ones can stay, of course. Mr. Briggs is a generous man. But you'd be working his land. All of you. My children are not laborers. Pike shrugged. They eat, don't they? Ruth's voice dropped. Get out of my husband's chair. Pike smiled. Then he called out. Hey kids, come say hello. That's when Ruth grabbed the knife. You don't speak to my children. You don't look at my children. You stand up and walk out that door, or I swear to God. Pike stood. Slow. He was a full head taller than her. He looked at the knife in her hand like it was a toy. 1 week, Mrs. Calloway. Mr. Briggs will be back, and next time he won't be so polite. He left. Ruth locked the door. She sank to the floor and pressed her face against her knees and shook. Jacob found her like that. He knelt beside her. His voice was steady, but his hands were trembling. Mama, what do we do? Ruth lifted her head. She looked at her son, 12 years old, his father's eyes, his father's jaw, and already his father's stubborn courage. We leave. Tonight. Where? Anywhere that's not here. She packed in the dark, 2 changes of clothes for each child, the last of the bread and jerky, a canteen, Daniel's knife for Jacob, and the ledger. She strapped Henry to her back. She took Lily's hand. Jacob walked ahead with a lantern they couldn't light because someone might see. They left through the back fence and walked north into the darkness. They didn't look back. Day 1 wasn't terrible. They had food. They had water. The children were scared but obedient. Henry thought they were on an adventure. Day 2, the food ran out. Day 3, the water ran out. By noon on the 3rd day, the heat was unbearable. Montana summers could fool you. People thought cold when they thought Montana, but July in the lowlands could cook a man alive. The air shimmered. The ground cracked. Everything that moved was either running from something or dying from something. Lily stopped humming. Henry stopped walking. Ruth carried him. She carried him until her arms gave out, and then Jacob took him. Jacob carried his baby brother on his back legs, wobbling, jaw clenched, refusing to fall. Then Lily sat down. "Mama, I can't." Ruth knelt. "Yes, you can. A little farther." "My feet hurt." Ruth looked. Lily's shoes were gone. She'd lost them somewhere in the night. Her feet were raw, blistered, bleeding. Ruth pulled off her own socks and wrapped them around Lily's feet. They were too big, but they were something. "There. Better." Lily nodded. She didn't say it was better, but she stood. They walked another mile, maybe 2. Ruth couldn't tell anymore. The world had narrowed to one thought forward. One more step. One more step. One more step. Then Jacob said, "Smoke." Ruth looked up. West. Maybe 2 miles. A thin line of gray against the white sky. A ranch. Could be. Could be dangerous. Jacob looked at her. "Mama, we're dying out here." He was right. She knew he was right. Henry was limp on Jacob's back. Lily was stumbling every 3rd step. Ruth herself was seeing spots at the edges of her vision. "Okay, we go." Silas Kane was shoeing a horse when he saw them. At first he thought it was heat shimmer. Prairie played tricks on a man's eyes, especially in July. But then the shimmer moved, stumbled, fell. He put down his hammer, squinted. 4 figures. No, 3 walking, 1 being carried. He didn't think. He moved. By the time he reached them, the woman was on her knees. The boy beside her was barely standing, a small child slumped on his back. A girl was curled on the ground, eyes half closed. "Please," the woman whispered. Her lips were cracked. Her face was sunburned raw. "Just water, please." Silas didn't ask who they were, didn't ask where they came from. He took the baby from the boy's back. The boy almost collapsed when the weight lifted, and said one word. "Come." He walked slow. They could barely keep up even at that pace. The boy wouldn't let his mother fall. He kept his arm under hers, holding her up, and Silas could see the effort it cost him. At the house, he sat them on the porch, went inside, came back with a jug of water and tin cups. "Small sips, slow. Too much too fast will make you sick." The woman reached for the cup with both hands. She drank like someone who'd forgotten what water tasted like. Then she stopped herself and handed the cup to the girl first. Silas watched that. A woman half dead from thirst giving her water to her child first. He filed that away. He brought bread, dried venison, canned peaches he'd been saving. The children ate with their hands fast, desperate. The boy tried to eat slow, tried to show control, but his hands were shaking. The woman didn't eat. She just watched her children, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. When the children had eaten enough to take the edge off, Silas spoke. "You running from the law?" "No." "From a man." She hesitated. Then, "From a man and everyone who works for him." "He coming after you?" "I don't know. Probably." Silas looked at the children. The boy fierce-eyed, protective, his hand on a knife that was too big for him. The girl curled against her mother, bare feet wrapped in bloody socks. The baby asleep now, in the shade, one arm around a wooden horse that he clutched, even unconscious. "How many children you got?" The woman's voice cracked. "3. These are all of them." Silas stood. He looked east, the direction they'd come from. Then he looked at the woman, at the boy, at the sleeping baby with the wooden horse. Something shifted in his chest, something he'd kept locked down for 15 years. "Good," he said. "I'll take all of you." The woman stared. "What? You heard me? You stay here. Work the ranch if you want to earn your keep. Don't work it if you can't. Either way, nobody's touching these children." "Why, you don't know us." Silas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like the words had been sitting in his throat for a long time. "Because I had a chance to protect someone once, and I didn't take it. I've been living with that every day since." He met her eyes. "I won't make that mistake again." The woman looked at her son. Jacob looked back. Something passed between them. Then Jacob nodded. Just barely. "Okay," Ruth said. "Okay." Silas showed them to the bunkhouse. It was small, dusty, but it had a real roof, real beds, and a door that locked from the inside. "Lock it tonight if it makes you feel safe," he said from the doorway. "I'll be in the main house. I don't come in here unless you ask me to." He turned to leave. "Wait," Ruth said. "What's your name?" "Silas. Silas Kane." "I'm Ruth. Ruth Calloway. That's Jacob Lilly, and the little one is Henry. We call him Baby." Silas looked at the sleeping boy in Ruth's arms. The wooden horse was still clutched tight. "Your husband make that horse?" Ruth's eyes filled. "Yes." Silas nodded. Something in his jaw tightened. "He was a good man," Ruth whispered. "They killed him for a piece of land." Silas didn't ask who they were, not yet. "Get some rest, Mrs. Calloway. Tomorrow's a new day." He walked back to the main house and sat on the porch. The sun was going down. The sky was turning that color it only turns in Montana, half gold, half purple, like the world couldn't decide whether to hold on or let go. He hadn't spoken that many words to another person in years. Inside the bunkhouse, Ruth locked the door. She laid Henry on the bed and tucked the blanket around him. Lily was already asleep, curled on her side, mouth open. Jacob sat on the edge of his bed, his father's knife across his knees. "Mama." "Yeah, baby." "You think we can trust him?" Ruth thought about the way Silas had taken Henry from Jacob's back. Gentle, careful, like he'd done it before, like he knew how to hold a child who was too tired to hold himself. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But he gave us water before he asked us questions. Your daddy always said that tells you everything about a man." Jacob was quiet for a long time. Then he lay down and turned to face the wall. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you," he said. "Or Lily, or Baby. I promised Papa." Ruth's heart broke and healed in the same moment. "I know you did, sweetheart. But you don't have to carry that alone. Who else is going to carry it?" Ruth had no answer. She lay down beside Henry, pressed her face against his hair. He still smelled like home. Somehow, even after 3 days in the dirt, and closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 days, she slept. Outside, Silas sat on the porch until the stars came out. He hadn't asked about the bruise on the boy's arm, hadn't asked about the knife the woman carried or the blood on it, hadn't asked why a mother and 3 children were walking through open prairie in July with no horse, no wagon, no supplies. He didn't need to ask. He knew what desperation looked like. He'd worn it on his own face for a decade. He checked his rifle, loaded. He set it against the porch rail where he could reach it fast. Then he spoke to no one, or maybe to everyone. "Not this time. Not on my land." The night was quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists in places where no one expects trouble. But trouble was already on its way. In Elk Crossing, Pike stood before Harlan Briggs's desk. "She's gone. Took the kids and ran, 3 days ago." Briggs didn't look up from his papers. "Direction?" "North, toward the open range. She's got Daniel's ledger." Pike went still. "You sure?" "It wasn't in the house. Wasn't in the shop. She took it." Now Briggs looked up. His eyes were flat, patient, the eyes of a man who had never lost anything he decided to keep. "Find her. Find the ledger. I don't care what it takes." "And the children?" Briggs stood. He walked to the window, looked out at the town he owned, every shop, every house, every soul in it. "Bring them all back. A woman alone with 3 kids can't have gotten far. And if someone's helping her..." Briggs' voice didn't change, didn't rise, didn't sharpen. That was the thing about him. The most dangerous thing he ever did, he did quietly. "Then deal with them too." Pike nodded and left. Briggs sat back down. He opened his ledger, not Daniel's, and went back to his numbers. Columns of figures, properties acquired, families displaced, water rights transferred, everything in order, everything accounted for, except one woman, one ledger, and 3 children who should have been easy to control. He'd fix that. He always did. Back at the ranch, the wind picked up, a summer storm building somewhere over the mountains, pushing warm air across the flatlands. The horses shifted in the corral. An owl called from the barn. Silas didn't sleep. He sat on the porch with his rifle and watched the dark, and for the first time in 15 years, he had something to watch it for. Ruth woke to the smell of bacon. For a moment, just a half second, she thought she was home. Thought Daniel was in the kitchen humming off key, the way he always did, burning the edges, the way he always did. She reached across the bed for him. Her hand found Henry's small back, rising and falling, warm, and everything came flooding back. She sat up. Lily was still asleep, curled tight, her feet wrapped in Ruth's socks, dark spots of blood soaked through. Jacob's bed was empty. His knife was gone. Ruth's chest seized. She was on her feet before she could think, pulling open the bunkhouse door, scanning the yard. Jacob was sitting on the porch of the main house, across from Silas, a plate of eggs and bacon between them, neither one speaking. Ruth let out a breath, then another. Her hands were shaking again. Silas looked up. "Morning, Mrs. Calloway. Coffee's on." She walked over slow. Jacob didn't look at her. He was eating with one hand, the other resting on his knife. "You should have woken me," Ruth said to Jacob. "You needed sleep." "That's not your call to make. You hadn't slept in 3 days, Mama." Ruth opened her mouth, closed it. He was right, and she hated that he was right, because 12-year-olds shouldn't have to be right about things like that. Silas poured her coffee without asking. Black. She took it. Their fingers didn't touch, but she noticed he was careful about that. Deliberate. Giving her space she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "Lily's feet," Ruth said. "They're bad. I've got salve in the barn. Bag balm. Works on horses, works on people." He paused. "If you'll allow it." "I'll do it myself. Just show me where." He nodded. No argument, no insistence, just acceptance. Jacob watched the whole exchange with eyes that missed nothing. Ruth brought food to the bunkhouse. Lily woke to the smell and ate like she'd been starving for a week, which wasn't far from the truth. Henry woke crying, confused, reaching for something that wasn't there. "Papa." Ruth pulled him close. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here. I want Papa." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Lily stopped eating. She looked at her mother with those careful eyes, too careful for 8 years old, and started humming. That same song, low and sweet. Henry's crying slowed, then stopped. He put his thumb in his mouth and leaned into Ruth's chest, the wooden horse pressed between them. Jacob stood in the doorway, watching all of it, His jaw was tight. "I'm going to help him with the horses," he said. Ruth looked up. "Jacob. He's got work to do. I'm not going to sit around eating his food for free." He was out the door before she could answer. Silas was in the corral when Jacob found him. He had a mare on a lead rope brushing her down. Didn't look up when the boy approached. "I want to help," Jacob said. "Okay. Not because I like you. Because we owe you." Silas stopped brushing. He looked at the boy. 12 years old, standing like he was 40, jaw set, shoulders squared, hand on a knife he probably didn't know how to use properly. "You don't owe me anything." "My mama says different." "Your mama's got her own mind. But I'm telling you straight, nobody owes me. You want to work. You want to sit on that porch all day, sit. Makes no difference to me." "It makes a difference to me." Silas studied him for a long moment. Then he handed the boy the brush. "Start at the shoulder. Work toward the hindquarters. She'll tell you if you're doing it wrong." Jacob took the brush. His grip was wrong, too tight, too high. But Silas didn't correct him. He let the boy figure it out. The mare shifted, flicked her tail, and Jacob adjusted, loosened his hand, found the rhythm. "What's her name?" Jacob asked. "Bonnie." "My pa had a mare named June." "Good name for a horse." "She died. After Pa did. Nobody fed her. We couldn't—" Jacob's voice caught. He kept brushing, harder now. "We couldn't take care of anything after he was gone." Silas said nothing. He picked up a hoof pick and started working on Bonnie's front foot. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. "Did you mean what you said?" Jacob asked. "Last night. About protecting someone and not doing it. I meant it." "Who?" Silas set the hoof down. He straightened up slow. "My brother." "What happened to him?" "He died. Because I made a choice, and it was the wrong one." Jacob stopped brushing. "You killed your brother." "No, but I didn't save him when I could have. Sometimes that's the same thing." The boy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My pa told me to protect them. My mama and Lily and baby. He told me the night before he died. Made me promise." "That's a heavy thing to put on a boy." "I ain't a boy." Silas almost smiled. Almost. "No, I reckon you ain't." They worked in silence after that. But something had shifted. Not trust, not yet. Something smaller. A crack in the wall between them barely wide enough to see through. Inside the bunkhouse, Ruth was cleaning Lily's feet. The girl sat still, biting her lip, not making a sound. "You can cry, baby. It's okay." "I don't want to cry." "Why not?" "Because Jacob doesn't cry, and you don't cry." Ruth's hands stilled on her daughter's foot. "Lily, look at me." Lily looked. "I cry every night. After you're all asleep. I cry so hard my chest hurts. And you know what? It doesn't make me weak. It keeps me going." Lily's lip trembled. One tear, then another. Then she folded into her mother's arms and sobbed. Deep, ragged, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Ruth held her and rocked her and said nothing, because sometimes there's nothing to say. Sometimes you just hold on. When Lily pulled back, her face was blotchy and swollen, but her eyes were clearer. "Mama." "Yeah." "Is this where we live now?" Ruth looked around the bunkhouse. Dust floating in the light. Old blankets. A rusted stove. It was nothing. It was everything. For now, baby. For now. The days that followed had a rhythm to them. Not easy, not comfortable, but steady. And after 3 weeks of running and hiding and starving steady, felt like a miracle. Ruth took over the kitchen in the main house. Silas hadn't argued, mostly because his idea of cooking was boiled beans and burnt coffee, and he knew it. She found flour, salt, lard, and a neglected garden out back, with tomatoes going wild, and herbs Ruth didn't think a man like Silas would plant. "My brother planted those." Silas said when she asked. Years ago. I never had the heart to pull them up. It was the second time he'd mentioned his brother. Ruth filed it away. Didn't push. Jacob worked the ranch every day. By the end of the first week, he could saddle a horse alone. By the end of the second, he could ride one. Silas taught him the way a man teaches someone he respects, direct, no hand-holding, and honest when the boy made mistakes. Your seat's wrong. You're gripping with your knees. Relax your legs, or she'll fight you all day. I am relaxed. No, you ain't. You're holding on like the world's gonna throw you off. Trust the horse. I don't trust the horse. Then trust yourself. Jacob adjusted. Bonnie settled beneath him. For 3 strides, it was perfect, fluid, natural, like the boy had been born on horseback. Then he tensed up again, and Bonnie skittered sideways. Silas shook his head. Better. Again. Lily was a different kind of problem. She wasn't angry like Jacob wasn't shut down. She was too open, too trusting. She followed Silas around like a shadow and asked questions no one had asked him in 15 years. Mr. Silas, how come you live alone? Just do. Don't you get lonely? Horses don't talk much, but they're good company. Horses can't hug you. Silas had no answer for that. Lily waited like she expected one. When it didn't come, she shrugged and said, I'll hug you if you want. I'm a good hugger. Mama says so. He looked away. Go help your mother, Lily. She went. But the next morning she sat beside him on the porch again, and the morning after that. On the 5th day, she brought him a drawing. She'd done it in the dirt with a stick, and then copied it onto a piece of brown paper she found in the barn. What is it? Silas asked. It's you. And Bonnie. And that's Jacob trying not to fall off. It was terrible. Stick figures with too many arms. But Silas looked at it for a long time. That's real good, Lily. You can keep it. He folded it careful and put it in his shirt pocket. Lily beamed, and something in Silas's chest that had been locked tight for 15 years cracked open another inch. But it was Henry who broke him. The boy barely spoke. He carried that wooden horse everywhere, to breakfast, to the corral, to bed. He watched Silas from behind Ruth's legs, thumb in his mouth, big eyes tracking every movement. On the 8th night, Ruth was putting the children to bed. Henry was restless, turning and whimpering. Ruth reached for him, but he squirmed away. What's wrong, baby? Want Papa. I know. Not you. Want Papa. Ruth's face crumbled. She turned away so he wouldn't see. Lily started humming. Jacob pulled the blanket up and turned to the wall. Ruth pressed her hand to her mouth and breathed through it. The next morning, Henry wandered out of the bunkhouse alone. Ruth was in the kitchen. Jacob was in the corral. Nobody saw him go. He walked to the barn where Silas was mending a bridle. The big man didn't notice the small boy standing in the doorway until Henry spoke. Are you somebody's papa? Silas looked down. Henry was clutching the wooden horse, staring up at him with those enormous eyes. No, Silas said. How come? Just never was. Henry considered this. Then he walked over right up to Silas, close enough to touch, and held up the wooden horse. My papa made this. Silas took it careful, turned it over in his hands. The carving was good, detailed, made by someone who cared about getting it right. Your papa was talented. He's in heaven. I know. Mama says he watches us, but I can't see him. Silas handed the horse back. His throat was tight. That don't mean he ain't there. Henry took the horse. He stood there for another moment. Then he reached up with his free hand and grabbed Silas's finger. Just held it. Didn't say anything. Just held on. Silas didn't move. Didn't breathe. This small, warm hand wrapped around his finger, and something inside him shattered so completely, he knew it would never go back together the same way. Henry held on for 10 seconds, maybe 15. Then he let go, tucked the horse under his arm, and walked out of the barn. Silas sat down on a hay bale. He put his face in his hands, and for the first time in 15 years, Silas Kane cried. Not for long, not loud, but enough. Ruth found him a few minutes later. She'd been looking for Henry and tracked his small footprints to the barn. She stopped in the doorway. Silas had his back to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped his knees. She didn't say anything. She just stood there for a moment, then quietly walked away. Some things don't need words. 2 weeks in. The ranch was coming alive. Ruth's cooking had put weight back on everyone, including Silas, who she suspected had been surviving on jerky and stubbornness for the better part of a decade. The garden was producing. Jacob had started repairing the barn fence on his own without being asked. Lily had covered one wall of the bunkhouse with dirt drawings and was lobbying hard for real paint. And Henry. Henry had started following Silas. Not constantly, not obviously. But if Silas was shoeing a horse, Henry was sitting on the fence watching. If Silas was at the forge, he had a small one behind the barn left over from his blacksmith days. Henry was there fascinated by the fire and the hammer and the way hot metal bent under force. Careful, Silas said. Hot. I know, I'm not a baby. Your mama calls you baby. That's different. She's allowed. Silas's mouth twitched. Fair enough. One evening after the children were in bed, Ruth came to the main house porch. Silas was sitting there as he always was, rifle against the rail, coffee in hand. Can I sit? Porch isn't mine. Well, it is, but you don't need permission. She sat. The silence was different now, easier. 3 weeks of proximity had worn the sharp edges off. Jacob talked about you today, Ruth said. Should I be worried? He said you're a hard worker. Coming from him, that's practically a love letter. Silas huffed. Not quite a laugh, but close. He's a good kid. Got a chip on his shoulder the size of Montana, but he'll grow into it. He blames himself, for Daniel. Thinks if he'd been bigger, stronger. He was 12. He couldn't have done a damn thing. I know that. You know that. He doesn't. Silas was quiet. Then, I was 26 when I lost my brother. Grown man, soldier. And I blamed myself every day for 10 years. Still do most mornings. If a grown man can carry that weight and barely survive it, imagine what it's doing to a boy. Ruth looked at him. What happened with your brother? Silas took a long drink of coffee, set the cup down. His name was Everett, 4 years younger than me. Our folks died when I was 14, he was 10. I raised him, fed him, taught him, kept him out of trouble. When the war came, I enlisted. He followed me. I told him not to, but he was stubborn. A pause. Like someone else I know. Ruth didn't smile. She could hear where this was going. We were in Tennessee. Bad fight. Everett's unit got overrun. They took prisoners. I knew where the camp was. I could have gone. Could have gotten him out. But my commanding officer ordered me to hold position. We were guarding a supply line. 30 men depending on me. His voice went flat, mechanical, like he'd told this story to himself so many times it had lost its edges. I stayed. I followed orders. Everett died in that camp 3 weeks later. Dysentery, they said. He was 22. Ruth reached out. Her hand found his forearm. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. You did what you had to. No, I did what I was told. There's a difference. Silas? I'm not telling you this for sympathy, Mrs. Calloway. I'm telling you because I want you to understand something. He looked at her. I will not choose duty over people again. Not ever. Whatever's coming for you and those children, I'm not walking away. I need you to know that. Ruth's eyes filled. She blinked hard. You keep calling me Mrs. Calloway. That's your name. My name is Ruth. He held her gaze. Ruth. It was the first time he'd said it. And something about the way he said it, careful, like he was handling something fragile, made her chest ache. "Thank you, Silas, for everything. Don't thank me yet." She didn't ask what he meant. Part of her didn't want to know. The next morning, Jacob came running from the east pasture. Riders, 3 of them, coming from the south road. Silas was on his feet before Jacob finished the sentence. "How far?" "Mile, maybe less." "Get your mother, get your sister and brother, bunkhouse, lock the door." "I'm not hiding." "Jacob." Silas's voice cut like a blade. "This is not a discussion. You protect your family. That's your job. Let me do mine." Something in the way he said it, your job, not a boy's job, but a man's job, made Jacob stop arguing. He ran. Silas went into the house, came out with his rifle and a revolver tucked in his belt. He walked to the front gate and waited. They came in a line. 3 riders. Dust-covered, armed. The one in front was Pike. Ruth had described him well, tall, lean face like a hatchet. Behind him, 2 men Ruth hadn't mentioned. Hired guns. Cheap ones by the look of them. Pike pulled up 10 yards from the gate. His horse stamped. He looked at the ranch, the house, the barn, the bunkhouse. "Afternoon. State your business." "Looking for a woman. 3 kids. Come from Elk Crossing. You seen 'em?" "Nope." Pike smiled, thin, practiced. "That's funny, because we tracked 'em right to your property line. Footprints don't lie, mister." "Kane, and I said I haven't seen them." "Mind if we look around?" "I do mind." Pike leaned forward in his saddle. "Mr. Kane, I'm going to be straight with you. That woman has property belonging to Mr. Harlan Briggs. She's also got debts, legal debts. We're here to collect." "Nobody's collecting anything from my land." "So they are here." Silas said nothing. His finger rested along the trigger guard. Not on the trigger. Not yet. Pike studied him, measuring, calculating. "You know what Mr. Briggs does to people who get in his way. I know what I do to people who threaten children on my property." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle. Nervous. Pike noticed and his jaw tightened. 3 of us. 1 of you. Math's not in your favor, cowboy." Silas raised the rifle, slow, deliberate, aimed at Pike's chest. "I only need 1 bullet for you. The other 2 will figure out the rest." Nobody moved. The hired guns looked at each other. Pike's hand hovered near his holster, then a voice from the bunkhouse, small, clear, carrying across the yard like a bell. "Mama, why is that man yelling at Mr. Silas?" Lily, standing at the window. Ruth pulled her back, but it was too late. Pike saw them. His smile widened. "There they are. Mrs. Calloway, Mr. Briggs sends his regards. Says he'd like his property back." Ruth appeared in the bunkhouse doorway. She had Daniel's knife in her hand. "I don't have his property. He has mine." "Now, ma'am, that's not what the papers say." "The papers are forged. Your boss is a thief and a murderer, and you know it." Pike's smile didn't waver. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am. You got proof." Ruth's hand went to her dress pocket. The ledger was there. She always kept it there. But she said nothing, held Pike's stare. "That's what I thought," Pike said. He turned back to Silas. "Last chance, Kane. Hand them over. We ride away. Nobody gets hurt." Silas fired into the dirt. The shot cracked the air like thunder. Pike's horse reared. The hired gun's horses scattered sideways. "Next one's not a warning." Pike got his horse under control. His face had changed. The smile was gone. What was left underneath was cold. Flat. "You just made a mistake, Kane. A real bad one." "I've made worse. Now get off my land." Pike held his stare for 3 long seconds. Then he yanked his horse around. "Let's go." They rode south. Didn't look back. But Silas didn't lower the rifle until the dust cloud was a smudge on the horizon. Ruth came out of the bunkhouse. The children were behind her. Henry was crying. Lily was shaking. Jacob had his knife out, white-knuckled. "They'll come back," Ruth said. Not a question. "Yes." "With more men." "Yes." "Then we need to be ready." Silas looked at her. This woman who'd been half dead 3 weeks ago, standing in his yard, knife in hand, jaw-set, eyes burning. "You've got fire, Ruth Calloway." "I've got children. That's better than fire." She turned to Jacob. "Put that knife away and go check on the horses. Lily, take baby inside. I need to talk to Mr. Kane." The children moved. When they were alone, Ruth reached into her pocket and pulled out the ledger. "This is what Briggs wants. More than me. More than the children. This." She held it out. Silas took it, opened it. Pages of careful handwriting. Names, dates, amounts. Property transfers. Forged signatures. Bribed officials. "Your husband wrote this every night for 2 years. He knew what Briggs was doing. Knew nobody would believe a saddlemaker over the richest man in the territory, so he documented everything." Silas turned the pages slow. His face hardened with each one. "This is enough to hang him. If we can get it to the right person." "Who?" "There's a federal judge, Judge Mercer. He rides circuit through Helena. Daniel said he was the only honest man in the territory." "Helena's 4 days' ride." "I know." Silas closed the ledger, held it in both hands like it weighed 100 pounds. "If Briggs finds out you have this, he won't send Pike. He'll come himself. And he won't be looking to collect debts. He'll be looking to bury evidence." Ruth met his eyes. "I know that too. And you still came here, with 3 children and a target on your back." "I came here because I was dying. I stayed because you gave me a reason to fight." Silas looked at her for a long time. The wind pressed her dress against her legs. Her hair was coming loose from its braid. She looked exhausted, fierce, and absolutely certain. "All right," he said. "Then we fight." He handed the ledger back. "Keep it on you. Every minute of every day. If something happens to me..." "Nothing's going to happen to you. If something happens to me, you take the children and you ride north. Don't stop until you reach Helena. Find Judge Mercer. Give him the ledger. He'll know what to do." "Silas." "Promise me, Ruth." She took the ledger, pressed it against her chest. "I promise." That night Silas taught Jacob to shoot. Not the rifle, the boy wasn't big enough to handle the kick. But the revolver. How to hold it, how to aim, how to breathe before pulling the trigger. Both eyes open. Don't hold your breath. Squeeze, don't pull. Jacob fired. Missed the fence post by a foot. Again. Fired. Closer. Again. Third shot hit the post. Jacob's face lit up. For 1 second he looked like what he was, a 12-year-old boy who'd done something he was proud of. "Good," Silas said. "Now do it 50 more times until you can hit it in the dark." Jacob's grin faded, but his determination didn't. He reloaded and fired again. Ruth watched from the porch. Henry on her hip, Lily pressed against her side. She watched this man she barely knew teach her son to defend himself, and she felt 2 things at once. Gratitude so deep it hurt, and a terrible fear that she'd brought death to his doorstep. Lily tugged her sleeve. "Mama?" "Yeah, baby. Is the bad man going to come back?" Ruth looked down at her daughter, 8 years old, already learning that the world had bad men in it, and they didn't always lose. "Maybe." "Is Mr. Silas going to stop him?" Ruth watched Silas adjust Jacob's grip, patient, steady, showing the boy the same thing for the 10th time without a flicker of frustration. "We're all going to stop him, Lily. Together." Lily thought about this, then she nodded. "Good, because I'm tired of running." Ruth pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Me too, baby. Me too." In the bunkhouse that night, after the children were asleep, Ruth sat on the edge of her bed and opened the ledger. She turned to the last page Daniel had written. His handwriting, neat, careful, slanting slightly, left the way it always did. The last entry was dated the day before he died. "If you're reading this, Ruth, then I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to do right. Take care of our babies. And know this, I loved you more than I ever knew how to say. D. Ruth closed the ledger. She held it against her heart and rocked slow silent, the tears falling without sound. Outside, Silas made his rounds. Checked the horses, checked the fences, checked the horizon. Then he sat on the porch with his rifle and watched the dark road south and waited for what he knew was coming. They came on a Sunday. Ruth knew it was Sunday because Lily had asked if they could pray. Not in a church, there wasn't one for 50 miles, but on the porch the way they used to with Daniel. So Ruth gathered the children and they bowed their heads, and Lily said a prayer she'd memorized from her father's funeral. She was halfway through it when Jacob stood up. Dust, South Road. Silas was already moving. He grabbed the rifle from the porch rail and tossed the revolver to Jacob. The boy caught it clean. Didn't fumble. 3 weeks of practice had made his hand steady. Ruth, bunkhouse, now. No. Silas turned. Ruth was standing with Henry on her hip, her hand in her pocket gripping the ledger. I'm not hiding in that bunkhouse while you face them alone. Not this time. Ruth. Last time Pike saw me hiding behind a locked door. He saw a scared woman with no fight left. That's exactly what Briggs wants him to see. She set Henry down and knelt in front of him. Lily, take baby inside. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me, Jacob, or Mr. Silas. Lily took Henry's hand. Her face was white, but her voice was steady. Come on, baby. Let's go count the horses from the window. Henry looked at Ruth. Mama. Go with your sister, sweetheart. I'll be right here. They went. The bunkhouse door closed. The lock turned. Ruth stood and faced Silas. How many? He was squinting at the dust cloud. His jaw tightened. More than 3. It was 6. Pike in front, 5 men behind him. And behind them, all riding a black horse with a silver bridle, was Harlan Briggs himself. Ruth's stomach dropped. She'd seen Briggs plenty of times in Elk Crossing, at the general store, at town meetings, at Daniel's funeral, where he'd shaken her hand and told her what a fine man her husband had been. But she'd never seen him like this, riding toward her with the calm certainty of a man who'd come to collect what he believed was his. They stopped at the gate. 6 guns, 1 rifle, 1 revolver in a 12-year-old's hands. Briggs dismounted slow, brushed the dust from his coat, adjusted his hat. Every movement deliberate, unhurried, like a man who had never been told no and couldn't imagine why he would be. Mrs. Calloway. His voice carried across the yard. Warm, almost kind. That was the worst part. You've led us on quite a chase. Ruth's hand tightened on the knife in her boot. Mr. Briggs. Long way from Elk Crossing. It is, but some things are worth the ride. He looked at Silas. Mr. Kane, I understand you've been housing my tenants. They ain't your tenants. The law says different. Your law, not mine. Briggs smiled, the kind of smile that didn't move past his mouth. I didn't come here to argue, Mr. Kane. I came to resolve this peacefully. Mrs. Calloway has something that belongs to me, and I have a legal claim to her labor. We can settle this like civilized people, or... He gestured at the men behind him. We can settle it the other way. Ruth stepped forward. Silas put his arm out to stop her. She pushed past it. You want to talk about what belongs to who, Mr. Briggs? Let's talk. Let's talk about my husband's shop that you stole. Let's talk about the water rights you took from 6 families in the valley. Let's talk about Daniel. Briggs' expression didn't change. Your husband had an unfortunate accident. His saddle girth was cut. That's speculation. That's murder. The word hung in the air. Pike's hand moved to his holster. The hired guns shifted. Briggs held up a hand. Everyone stilled. Mrs. Calloway? I understand your grief. Truly I do. But making wild accusations won't bring your husband back. What will help is coming home, settling your debts, and giving your children a stable life. I'm offering that. You're offering slavery. I'm offering employment. For my children, ages 4, 8, and 12. Briggs shrugged. Children work on ranches all across this territory. It's hardly unusual. Not for the man who murdered their father. Something flickered in Briggs's eyes. Fast. Gone. But Ruth saw it. And she knew in that moment that Briggs wasn't just here for the labor contract or the property. He was here for the ledger. He knew she had it, and he knew what was in it. I'll ask you one more time, Mrs. Calloway. Come back to Elk Crossing. Bring the children. We'll work out a fair arrangement. And the ledger? Briggs went very still. What ledger? Daniel's ledger. The one with every dirty deal you've made for the last 5 years, every forged contract, every bribed official, every family you've stolen from. Ruth pulled it from her pocket and held it up. This ledger. Pike drew his gun. 2 of the hired men did the same. Silas raised the rifle. Guns down. Now. Easy, Mr. Kane, Briggs said. His voice was still calm, but something underneath had shifted. Something cold and sharp. Nobody needs to get hurt. Then tell your dogs to holster their weapons. Briggs nodded at Pike. Slow. Pike holstered. The others followed. That ledger, Briggs said carefully, is stolen property. Daniel took those documents from my office. Daniel wrote those documents, in his own hand. Every entry, every name, every dollar. Ruth's voice was shaking, but she didn't stop. And I'm taking them to Judge Mercer in Helena. And when he reads what's in here, you won't own a single acre in this territory. Briggs stared at her. The mask slipped. Just for a second. Underneath was something Ruth had never seen before: fear. Real fear. The fear of a man who had built an empire on paper and was watching it catch fire. Then the mask came back. Harder than before. $2,000. Ruth blinked. What? $2,000 for the ledger. Cash. Right now. That's more money than your husband made in 5 years. You think I'd sell my husband's murder for $2,000? $5,000? You could offer me every cent you have and I'd spit on it. Briggs' jaw tightened. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Calloway. No, my mistake was not running sooner. Briggs turned to Silas. Mr. Kane, you seem like a reasonable man. This woman is going to get herself and those children killed over a book full of a dead man's accusations. Is that what you want? Silas's voice was flat. What I want is for you to get off my land. This doesn't concern you. The moment you threatened children on my property, it concerned me. I haven't threatened anyone. You brought 6 armed men to a ranch where 3 kids are hiding in a bunkhouse. That's a threat. Briggs studied him. Cold, calculating. You're a soldier, I can tell, which means you can count. 6 guns against 1 rifle. Even if you get me, Pike gets you. Then your woman and those children have nobody. Silas didn't flinch. You're assuming Pike's faster than me. Pike's hand twitched toward his holster. Silas tracked the movement without turning his head. Try it, Silas said quietly. Please. Nobody moved. The hired guns looked at Briggs, waiting for the order. Briggs looked at Ruth. Ruth held the ledger against her chest like a shield. Then Briggs did something none of them expected. He laughed. You know what, keep the ledger. Take it to Helena. Ride 4 days through open country with 3 children and a book. See how far you get. He turned to Pike. We're leaving. Pike stared at him. Sir, I said we're leaving. Mount up. Briggs climbed onto his horse, looked down at Ruth one last time. I own the road to Helena, Mrs. Calloway. Every mile of it. Every town, every way station, every sheriff between here and there. He tipped his hat. Safe travels. They rode off. 6 men. No shots fired. But Ruth's blood was ice. Because she understood exactly what Briggs had just told her. He wasn't going to fight them here. He was going to let them run, and then he was going to hunt them down in the open, where there were no walls, no fences, no witnesses. "He's going to ambush us," Ruth said. Silas lowered the rifle. "I know. We can't ride to Helena. Not by the main road." Jacob came off the porch. He'd been standing there the whole time, revolver aimed at Pike's back. His hands were shaking now, but they hadn't been shaking during. That told Silas something important about the boy. "There's another way," Jacob said. Ruth and Silas both looked at him. "Papa used to ride to Fort Ellis through the mountain pass. Said it cut 2 days off the trip. Nobody uses it because it's narrow and the horses don't like it, but Papa did it twice a year. You remember the way. I rode it with him, last fall, before—" Jacob's voice caught. He swallowed. "Before." Silas looked at Ruth. She looked at her son. This boy who'd lost his father, carried his baby brother across the prairie, learned to shoot a revolver in 3 weeks, and was now offering to guide them through mountain country because of rides he'd taken with a dead man. "Can you do it?" Ruth asked him, not doubting, asking. "Yes, ma'am." Ruth looked at Silas. "Then we go through the mountains." Silas shook his head. "Not all of us. If we all go, Briggs will know. He'll have men watching the ranch. The second we ride out together, he'll follow." "Then what?" "I ride to Helena, alone. Faster that way. I can make it in 2 days through the pass if I push hard." "No." Ruth's voice was sharp. "You're not going alone, and I'm not staying here waiting to see if you come back." "Ruth." "Daniel went alone. Daniel handled things alone. Daniel didn't let me help because he wanted to protect me, and now he's dead." Her voice cracked but held. "I'm done being protected. I'm going with you. And the children—" That stopped her. It always came back to the children. Silas saw it, the impossible calculation every mother makes. Risk everything and maybe save everyone. Play it safe and definitely lose. "There's a woman in town," Silas said. "Doc Maggie Holt. She's a physician. Been here 20 years. Briggs hates her because she's the one person in the territory he can't buy or scare. If anyone will take the children, it's Maggie." "You trust her?" "With my life. She set my arm when I broke it 2 winters ago. Refused payment. Said my company was punishment enough." Ruth almost smiled. Almost. "And the children will be safe. Maggie's got a shotgun and a temper. Nobody messes with Maggie." Ruth knelt on the ground. She pressed her palms against her thighs and breathed. In. Out. The weight of what she was about to do settled on her shoulders like a yoke. "Jacob stays with the children." "Mama, no." "Jacob." She stood and faced him. "You made your father a promise. You said you'd protect Lily and Henry. I'm asking you to keep that promise. But this is what protecting them looks like. Not riding into danger, staying, being there, being steady." Jacob's eyes were red. His jaw worked. He wanted to argue. She could see it in every muscle, but he looked at the bunkhouse door where his sister and brother were hiding, and something in him settled. "You come back," he said, not asking, telling. "I will." "You promise." "I promise." He nodded once. Then he turned and walked into the bunkhouse. Ruth heard Lily say, "Jacob, what happened?" And then the door closed. Ruth looked at Silas. "When do we leave?" "Tonight, after dark. I'll ride into town, now talk to Maggie. We'll move the children at dusk." He was saddling Bonnie when Ruth came into the barn. She stood there watching him work, and then she said something that surprised them both. "I want you to know if we don't make it back, Jacob knows where the ledger is. I'll leave a copy of the key entries with Maggie. Even if Briggs stops us, the truth survives." Silas cinched the saddle. His hands paused on the leather. "We're going to make it back, Ruth. But if we don't?" He turned to face her. This woman. 3 weeks ago she'd been dying in his yard. Now she was planning for her own death with the calm precision of a general. "If we don't," he said quietly, "then Jacob takes the children to Helena himself. Maggie will help, and Briggs burns." "Good." She turned to leave. Stopped. "Silas." "Yeah." "Thank you. For not telling me to stay behind. Wouldn't have worked anyway." "No, it wouldn't have." She walked out. Silas finished saddling the horse and leaned his forehead against Bonnie's neck. "What have I gotten myself into?" "Girl." Bonnie didn't answer, but she nuzzled his shoulder, and somehow that was enough. Doc Maggie Holt was 60 years old, 5'2", and scared of absolutely nothing. She'd delivered half the babies in the territory, amputated a man's leg on a kitchen table during a blizzard, and once chased a grizzly off her porch with a broom. When Silas rode up and told her what he needed, she didn't hesitate. "Bring them tonight. I've got room." "Could be dangerous, Maggie." "Briggs. Harlan Briggs can kiss my medical bag. That man's been poisoning this territory for years, and everybody's too scared to spit in his direction. Bring the children. I'll keep them safe. If Pike comes, I've got a 12 gauge and 30 years of righteous anger. Pike won't set foot on my porch." Silas almost smiled. "I owe you, Maggie." "You owe me nothing. Just bring that woman's husband's evidence to someone who'll use it. This territory's been under Briggs' boot long enough." She paused, looked at Silas with those sharp, knowing eyes. "You care about her." "I care about doing what's right." "That's not what I asked." Silas said nothing. Maggie shook her head. "Lord help us all. A woman with 3 children and a target on her back, and you go and fall in love with her. You never did anything the easy way." "I'm not—" "Go. Bring the children before dark. And Silas." She grabbed his arm. Her grip was iron. "You bring that woman back alive. Those children need their mother." "Yes, ma'am." He rode back to the ranch at a gallop. Dusk came fast. Ruth had the children packed, 1 bag each. Henry's wooden horse. Lily's drawings folded careful and tucked into her dress. Jacob's knife. The ride to Maggie's took an hour. Ruth held Henry in front of her. Lily rode behind Jacob on the second horse. Nobody spoke. The children sensed it, that tight electric silence that means the adults are afraid, but won't say so. Maggie met them at the door. She took one look at the children and opened her arms. Come in. I've got soup on the stove and cornbread in the oven. Who's hungry?" Lily's hand shot up. "Me." "Good. I made extra. And you?" She looked at Jacob. "You look like you could eat a horse." "I could eat too. That's the spirit, inside all of you." Ruth knelt in front of her children. This was the moment. She'd rehearsed it in her head 100 times during the ride, and it still wasn't enough. "I have to go somewhere tonight, with Mr. Silas. It's important." "Where?" Lily asked. "To see a man who can help us, a judge." "Why can't we come?" "Because I need you to be safe, and Mrs. Maggie is going to keep you safe while I'm gone." Henry reached for her. "No go, Mama." Ruth's heart split clean in half. She pulled him close, breathed him in. He still smelled like no. He didn't smell like home anymore. He smelled like dust and horses and the salve she'd put on his sunburned nose. He smelled like the ranch, like their new life. "I'll be back, baby. I promise." "You always say promise." "And I always come back." Henry clung. Ruth peeled his fingers away one by one. Each one cost her something she'd never get back. Jacob took Henry from her, held him. Henry buried his face in his brother's neck. "Mama." Jacob's voice was steady. His eyes were not. 2 days. 2 days. Maybe 3. "If you're not back in 4, I'm coming after you." Jacob. 4 days, Mama. Then I come." Ruth looked at Maggie. The old woman nodded. "I'll keep them. Go." Ruth kissed Lily's forehead, kissed Henry's hair, put her hand on Jacob's cheek. "Your papa would be so proud of you." Jacob's jaw trembled. He clamped it shut. nodded once. Ruth walked out. She didn't look back. She couldn't, because if she saw Henry's face one more time, she'd never leave. Silas was waiting with 2 horses. He'd packed water food ammunition, 2 bedrolls, a map he'd drawn from memory. Ready? Ruth swung into the saddle. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was iron. Let's go. They rode north. The mountain pass was dark narrow, and the horses didn't like it. Bonnie kept tossing her head, spooked by shadows. Ruth's horse, a sturdy bay mare Silas called Nell, picked her way careful over loose rock. They rode for 3 hours without speaking. The only sounds were hooves on stone and the wind funneling through the canyon. Then Silas stopped. What? Ruth pulled up beside him. Listen. She listened. Nothing. Wind, rock, night. I don't hear. Exactly. No crickets, no owls. Something spooked them. He reached for the rifle. Slow. Ruth's hand went to the knife in her boot. A voice from above. That's far enough. Ruth looked up. A figure on the ridge, silhouetted against the stars. Then another, and another. 3 men, blocking the pass. Briggs' men, Ruth whispered. Don't know. The first figure moved forward, into the moonlight, and Ruth's blood went cold. It was Sheriff Polk, from Elk Crossing. The man who'd ruled Daniel's death an accident. The man who'd looked her in the eye at the funeral and said sorry for your loss. Evening, Mrs. Calloway, his voice echoed off the canyon walls. Headin' somewhere? Ruth said nothing. Her hand tightened on the knife. Mr. Briggs thought you might try the mountain pass. Smart move. Your husband showed you this route, I reckon. Silas's rifle was up. 3 men on a ridge. I've had worse odds. Put the gun down, Kane. This ain't your fight. I decide what's my fight. Polk sighed. Tired. Like a man doing a job he hated, but wouldn't quit. Mrs. Calloway, I'm going to be straight with you. Briggs wants the ledger. Give it to me, ride back to Kane's ranch, and this whole thing is over. He'll tear up the contract. You keep the children. Nobody gets hurt. And the ledger disappears. The ledger is evidence of a dead man's grudge. It won't hold up in court. Let Judge Mercer decide that. Mercer's not going to help you, ma'am. Briggs has friends in Helena, too. Ruth felt something cold settle in her stomach. You're saying there's no one. I'm saying the world doesn't work the way you want it to. I'm saying sometimes you take the deal and live. Daniel took the deal. Daniel stayed quiet. Daniel played it safe. Ruth's voice rose. And you buried him in a pine box and called it an accident. Polk flinched. Actually flinched. I didn't kill your husband. You looked the other way. Same thing. Silence. The wind howled through the pass. Polk's men shifted on the ridge. Then Polk did something neither of them expected. He looked down at his boots, took off his hat, ran his hand through his hair, and when he looked up, the sheriff was gone. What was left was just a tired old man with too many sins and not enough years to pay for them. You're right, he said. I looked the other way. I've been looking the other way for 8 years. And I'm tired, Mrs. Calloway. I'm real damn tired. Then stop looking away. It ain't that simple. It is that simple. You have a badge. Use it. Polk looked at the badge on his chest, touched it with his thumb. Then he looked at the 2 men beside him. Go back to Briggs. Tell him I lost the trail. Sir. You heard me. Go. But Briggs said... I know what Briggs said. I'm telling you what I said. Get on your horses and ride back. Now. The men looked at each other. Confused. Scared. But Polk was still the sheriff, and habit is a powerful thing. They mounted up and rode south without another word. Polk looked down at Ruth and Silas. I can't go with you. Briggs will know. But I can give you 12 hours. Head through the pass tonight. By morning you'll be past the ridge and into open country. From there, Helena's a day and a half. Why? Silas asked. Why now? Polk put his hat back on. Because that woman just said what my wife's been telling me for 8 years, and I'm too old and too tired to keep pretending she's wrong. He turned his horse. Stopped. Mrs. Calloway. Sheriff. Your husband was a good man, best saddlemaker I ever knew, and I'm sorry I didn't say that when it mattered. He tipped his hat. Give Mercer hell. He rode into the dark. The sound of his horse faded, and then it was just Ruth and Silas alone in the pass, with the stars overhead and the road to Helena stretching out before them. Ruth was shaking, not from cold, from something bigger than cold. He let us go, she whispered. He did. Daniel always said Polk wasn't all bad, just weak. I didn't believe him. Sometimes weak men find their backbone when you least expect it. Ruth wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. We need to move. 12 hours isn't long. They rode hard through the night. The pass was treacherous. Loose shale, narrow switchbacks, drops that went straight down into nothing but the horses held. Ruth rode like a woman possessed, leaning into the dark, trusting the mare beneath her. At dawn, they cleared the pass. The land opened up rolling foothills, stretching north toward Helena. Ruth pulled up and looked back. The mountains stood behind them like a wall, between her and her children, between her and everything she'd run from. How far? She asked. Day and a half, maybe less if we push. Then we push. They watered the horses and ate in the saddle. Ruth hadn't slept. Neither had Silas. But sleep was a luxury for people who weren't racing a clock. By noon, they hit the main road to Helena. Silas wanted to avoid it, too exposed, but Ruth shook her head. Polk gave us 12 hours. By now Briggs knows we're in the pass. He'll send men through the mountains. If we take the back roads, they'll catch us. The main road is faster. It's also the first place they'll look. Then we ride faster than they look. Silas studied her. This woman who 3 weeks ago couldn't stand up. Now she was making tactical decisions that would have impressed his commanding officer. When did you get so brave? I've always been brave. I just didn't have anywhere to put it. They rode, mile after mile. The horses held steady. Ruth talked to Nell low, encouraging the way you talk to a friend who's carrying you through hell. Silas watched the road behind them and said nothing. Late afternoon. Ruth's hands were blistered from the reins. Her legs cramped, her vision blurred. Silas. Yeah. If Briggs gets the ledger, he wins. Every family Daniel wrote about, the Parkers, the Doyles, the Mendozas, they stay under his boot forever. Their children grow up working his land for nothing. That's what we're carrying, not just evidence. People's lives. I know. Then you understand why I can't fail. You won't fail. How do you know? Silas looked at her, exhausted, sunburned, blistered, fierce. Because I've seen men fail, watched them give up when the fight got hard, watched them fold. He shook his head. You don't fold, Ruth Calloway. I don't think you know how. Ruth held his gaze. Something passed between them. Not romance, not now, not yet. Something rawer. The recognition of two people who'd been broken by the world and chose to keep standing anyway. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. He looked away. His jaw worked. She'd said something that cracked through every wall he'd built, and they both knew it. They rode on. Night fell. They couldn't stop. Ruth dozed in the saddle, jerking awake every few minutes. Silas rode beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell. And then, as the stars wheeled overhead, and the horses' hooves beat a steady rhythm on the hard-packed road, Ruth saw lights. Distant. Flickering. A town. Silas? I see it. Helena. Helena. Ruth's chest heaved. She gripped the reins so hard her knuckles cracked. Tears cut through the dust on her face. Not sadness, not relief. Something fiercer. something that tasted like the first breath after nearly drowning. "We made it." "Not yet. We still need to find Mercer." "Then let's find him." They rode toward the lights. Two exhausted riders on two exhausted horses, carrying a dead man's words and a living woman's fury, and the faint, stubborn hope that justice still lived somewhere in this territory. Behind them, the road was dark, but somewhere on that road, moving fast, were men who'd been told to stop them at any cost. The race wasn't over. It was just beginning. Helena was bigger than Ruth expected. Even at night, the streets had people miners coming off shift saloon doors, swinging horses tied to posts outside buildings that still had their lamps burning. It smelled like coal smoke and whiskey and ambition. Ruth hadn't been in a real town since Elk Crossing. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by strangers. Every face looked like a threat. "Where do we find Mercer?" she asked. "Courthouse. But it won't be open until morning." "We don't have until morning." Silas pulled up in front of a boarding house. A hand-painted sign read, "Rooms 50 cents." He looked at Ruth. She looked like she might fall off her horse. "We need rest, even an hour." "Silas, you can barely sit up straight. If we find Mercer and you collapse in front of him, how does that help?" She wanted to argue, but her body made the argument for her. Her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't hold the reins steady, and the world had started tilting at the edges. "1 hour," she said. 1 hour. They didn't take a room. Too risky. Silas led the horses behind the boarding house to a small stable and paid the boy there a quarter to water and feed them. Ruth sat against the stable wall, the ledger pressed to her chest, and closed her eyes. She was asleep in 30 seconds. Silas didn't sleep. He sat beside her rifle across his knees, watching the alley. Every footstep made him turn. Every shadow made him reach for the trigger. He looked at Ruth. Asleep, she looked younger. The hard set of her jaw softened. The lines around her eyes eased. She looked like what she was, a 35-year-old woman who'd been carrying the weight of the world on her back and had finally, for one moment, set it down. He reached out, almost touched her hair, stopped himself, pulled his hand back, and gripped the rifle instead. 1 hour. Then they'd find Mercer. But Mercer found them first. Ruth woke to voices. Silas was on his feet, rifle raised, standing between her and a man she'd never seen. Tall, white-haired, sharp eyes behind wire spectacles. He wore a black coat and carried a leather satchel, and he was holding up both hands like a man who'd had guns pointed at him before and knew the drill. "Easy, son. I'm not armed." "Who are you?" "Judge Clayton Mercer. And unless I'm mistaken, you're the people Maggie Holt sent a telegram about." Ruth scrambled to her feet. Maggie sent a telegram. 6 hours ago. Said a woman with evidence against Harlan Briggs was writing to Helena and needed protection. She also said, he looked at Silas, that the woman was traveling with a stubborn fool who'd probably point a rifle at anyone who approached. I see she was accurate. Silas lowered the rifle, slowly. "You're Judge Mercer. 32 years on the bench, and I've been waiting for someone to bring me evidence on Harlan Briggs for about 20 of them." Ruth pulled the ledger from her chest. Her hands were trembling. She held it out. "My husband wrote this. Daniel Calloway. He was a saddle-maker in Elk Crossing. Briggs killed him for it." Mercer took the ledger. He opened it under the stable lantern and began to read. His face didn't change for the first page, or the second. But by the third page, his hands were gripping the leather so tight, his knuckles went white. "Lord Almighty," he whispered. "There's more," Ruth said. "Forged contracts. Families enslaved. Property stolen. It's all there." Mercer looked up. His eyes were bright. Not with anger, with something sharper. Purpose. "Mrs. Calloway, do you understand what you're holding? Evidence. This is more than evidence. This is the end of Harlan Briggs." He closed the ledger. "I'll need to verify these entries, cross-reference with county records. But if even half of this holds up, and from what I'm seeing, Briggs is looking at federal charges. Land fraud, coercion, possibly murder. Ruth's legs buckled. Silas caught her arm. She didn't pull away. "When?" she asked. "How long?" Mercer looked at her over his spectacles. "That depends on how far you're willing to go. I've ridden 2 days through a mountain pass with a dead man's ledger and Briggs's men on my tail. How much farther do you think I need to go?" Mercer studied her. Then he nodded. Something like respect settled in his expression. "I can convene a hearing by tomorrow afternoon. Emergency session. I'll need you to testify." "I'll testify." "Briggs will have lawyers. Good ones. They'll attack your credibility. Call you a grieving widow with a grudge. Say the ledger is fabricated. It's in my husband's handwriting. Every entry. His hand is on every page. Can you prove that—" Ruth reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded letter. She'd carried it since the day Daniel died, the last letter he'd ever written to her, found in his shop the day after the funeral. She'd kept it against her heart for 6 weeks. She held it out. Her hand shook. "Compare the handwriting. It's the same hand. His hand." Mercer took the letter. "Read it." His expression softened for just a moment. "He loved you very much. He died trying to do the right thing. I'm not going to let that be for nothing." Mercer folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "Keep that safe, Mrs. Calloway. We'll need it tomorrow. Now, you both need somewhere to stay where Briggs people can't find you. We'll manage. You'll stay at my house. I've got 2 spare rooms, a housekeeper who makes excellent biscuits, and a deputy U.S. Marshal who happens to be visiting from Butte." Mercer's mouth twitched. "Marshal Tillman, big fellow, not known for his patience with men who threaten women and children." Ruth looked at Silas. He gave a single nod. "All right," Ruth said. "Thank you, Judge. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when Briggs is in chains." They followed Mercer through the back streets of Helena to a white house on a hill overlooking the town. It was modest for a judge, no servants' quarters, no iron gate. Just a house with a wide porch and a light in the window. Marshal Tillman was waiting inside. He was exactly what Mercer described: big, broad, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and then frowned at. He wore a star on his chest and a colt on each hip. "This the woman?" Tillman asked. "This is Mrs. Calloway. And Mr. Kane." Tillman looked Silas up and down. "Maggie says you faced down 6 of Briggs' men with 1 rifle. Wasn't that dramatic? She also says you're sweet on the woman." Silas said nothing. Ruth said nothing. Mercer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could focus on the legal matter at hand." They sat at Mercer's dining table. Ruth laid out everything: Daniel's death, the forged property transfer, Pike's visit, the labor contract, the escape, Silas's ranch, Briggs's visit, the confrontation in the Pass Polk, letting them go. Tillman listened without expression. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Sheriff Polk let you through?" "Yes." "That's interesting. Polk's been on Briggs's payroll for years." "He said he was tired of looking the other way." Tillman grunted. "Tired or not, he's still complicit. But his testimony could bury Briggs if he's willing to give it." "Would he?" Mercer asked. "A man who lets a fugitive go when his boss told him to stop her. That man's already made his choice. He just doesn't know it yet." Mercer opened the ledger again, spread it on the table. "Mrs. Calloway, I need you to walk me through every entry, every name, every date, every transaction. Can you do that?" Ruth pulled the ledger toward her. "Daniel told me about most of these families. I know their stories. The Parkers, Will and Sarah Briggs, took their homestead in '74 by filing a false mining claim on their land. Told them they had no legal standing because Sarah's maiden name was on the deed and married women couldn't hold property. That's not true under Montana territorial law. The Parkers didn't know that. They couldn't read. Briggs knew they couldn't read." Mercer wrote. Tillman listened. Silas watched the window. Ruth went through them one by one. The Doyles' 4 children forced to work Briggs's timber operation after their father's accident in the mill. The Mendoza family their ranch seized because Briggs claimed they owed taxes they'd already paid, and the tax records conveniently disappeared from the county office. The widow Hanson offered a labor contract identical to the one Ruth had been forced to sign. 12 families in all. By the time she finished, it was nearly dawn. Mercer had filled 20 pages of notes. Tillman hadn't moved, but his face had changed. The granite was still there, but underneath it was something hot and sharp. "This man's been running a slave operation in plain sight," Tillman said quietly. "For 8 years," Ruth said. "And nobody stopped him because everybody was scared." "Not everybody." Tillman looked at her. "You weren't scared." "I was terrified. I still am. But my children are in that territory, and as long as Briggs is free, they're not safe." "Your children are with Maggie." "Yes." "Then they're safe for now. Maggie Holt is tougher than most men I've deputized." He stood. "I'll ride to Elk Crossing tonight. Bring Polk in. If he'll testify, we don't just have a case, we have a conviction." "And if he won't?" Silas asked. "Then the ledger and Mrs. Calloway's testimony will have to be enough." Tillman put on his hat. "But between you and me, a man who lets a woman go when he's been told to stop her, that man wants to talk. He just needs someone to ask." Tillman left before sunrise. Mercer went to the courthouse to prepare for the hearing. Ruth and Silas were alone in the judge's dining room. Ruth sat at the table. The ledger was in front of her. Daniel's letter beside it. She stared at them both. "I keep thinking he's going to walk through the door," she said. Silas sat across from her. He didn't speak. "I know he's gone. I've known for 6 weeks. But some mornings I wake up and reach for him and it hits me all over again. Like the first time." "Does it get easier?" "Is that a real question?" Silas looked at his hands. "Everett's been gone 15 years, and some mornings I still listen for him in the next room." Ruth looked at him. Really looked. This man who'd carried his guilt like a stone for half his life. Who'd built a ranch in the middle of nowhere and filled it with silence because silence was easier than feeling. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yeah." "When Henry grabbed your finger in the barn, I saw you. I was in the doorway. I saw what it did to you." Silas's jaw tightened. "And I thought this man is so full of love he's choking on it. He's been alone so long he forgot what it feels like to be needed, and it's killing him." "Ruth, I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens today, whatever happens with Briggs, you're not alone. And you don't have to be, ever again." Silas couldn't look at her. He stared at the table, at his hands, at the grain of the wood. His throat worked. His eyes burned. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Any of it. The being close to people, caring about what happens to them. I lost that somewhere between Tennessee and Montana, and I don't know if I can get it back." "You already have." "How do you know?" "Because you cried in a barn when a 4-year-old held your finger. Because you gave up your peace for a woman and 3 children you'd never met. Because you're sitting here right now instead of on your porch with your rifle pretending the world doesn't exist." She reached across the table, took his hand. He let her. "Henry doesn't grab just anyone's finger, Silas. He chose you. And so did I." Silas held her hand, held it like a man holding a rope over a cliff, terrified to grip too tight, more terrified to let go. "If this hearing goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, if Briggs walks free, I want you to take the children and go west. California, Oregon, somewhere Briggs can't reach." "I'm not running again." "Ruth, I ran from Elk Crossing. I ran through the prairie. I ran through the mountains. I'm done running. If Mercer can't stop Briggs, I'll find someone who can. And if no one can, I'll do it myself." "You can't fight a man like Briggs alone." "I'm not alone. You just told me that." He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth lifted just a fraction, and Ruth saw something she'd never seen on his face before: hope. Fragile and thin as new ice, but there. "You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met," he said. "And you're the stubbornest man, so we're even." He squeezed her hand. Once, then let go. "Get some sleep. The hearing's at 2. Ruth went to the spare room. She lay on a real bed for the first time in weeks. She thought of Henry, of Lily, of Jacob standing in Maggie's doorway, knife on his belt, watching her ride away. She thought of Daniel's letter in her pocket, of the last line he'd written: "I loved you more than I ever knew how to say." "I know," she whispered. "I'm finishing what you started." She slept, dreamless, deep. The hearing convened at 2 o'clock in the Helena Federal Courthouse. Mercer sat behind the bench in his robes, looking like a different man than the one who'd met them in a stable. Behind the spectacles and the white hair was steel. Ruth sat at the front. She'd washed her face, braided her hair, and borrowed a clean dress from Mercer's housekeeper. The dress was too big, but she'd pinned it. She looked respectable. She looked like exactly what she was, a mother who'd walked through hell and was ready to tell the world about it. Silas sat behind her, cleaned up but no less dangerous. His rifle was outside Mercer's rules, but the tension in his body said he didn't need a weapon to be a threat. The courtroom was small, a dozen wooden chairs, a clerk, 2 territorial lawyers Mercer had summoned as witnesses to the proceedings, and in the back a reporter from the Helena Independent, a young woman named Clara Dunmore, who'd been covering Briggs's land acquisitions for 2 years and had never been able to prove anything. "All rise," the clerk said. Mercer entered, sat, adjusted his spectacles. "This is an emergency hearing regarding allegations of land fraud, contract forgery, and criminal coercion against Harlan Briggs of Elk Crossing, Montana Territory. Mrs. Ruth Calloway, you may present your evidence." Ruth stood. Her knees shook. She gripped the edge of the table. "My husband, Daniel Calloway, was murdered by Harlan Briggs 6 weeks ago." She told them everything. Not with fury, she'd burned through fury weeks ago. She told it with clarity, with precision, the way Daniel would have wanted. She named every family, quoted every entry, held up the ledger and turned the pages one by one while the clerk copied the relevant passages. The lawyers asked questions. Ruth answered them, direct, no hesitation. "Can you prove these are your husband's writings?" She produced Daniel's letter. The handwriting was compared, identical. "Can you prove the contracts Mr. Briggs holds are forged?" "My husband documented the forgeries." Page 14 through 22. He noted which signatures were genuine and which were copies. He even identified the man Briggs hired to forge them, a clerk named Willard Spence, who works in the county recorder's office. Mercer sent a deputy to bring Spence in. They found him at his desk, drunk and shaking. He confessed in 11 minutes. "Briggs paid me $20 per signature," Spence said, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to. He said he'd burn my house down." The clerk wrote. Clara Dunmore wrote faster. Then the courthouse doors opened. Marshal Tillman walked in. Behind him, handcuffed and looking like a man who hadn't slept in days, was Sheriff Polk. But Polk wasn't in handcuffs as a prisoner. He'd come voluntarily. Tillman had found him on the road outside Elk Crossing, riding toward Helena on his own. "He was coming to testify," Tillman told Mercer. "I just gave him an escort." Polk took the stand. He looked at Ruth once. Then he looked at the floor. "I've been sheriff of Elk Crossing for 8 years. For 8 years I've done what Harlan Briggs told me to do. I looked the other way when he took people's land. I ruled Daniel Calloway's death an accident when I knew it wasn't. His voice broke. He took a breath. "I am complicit in the enslavement of 12 families and the murder of at least 1 man, probably more." The courtroom was silent. Ruth's eyes burned. She didn't blink. "Why are you here now?" Mercer asked. Polk looked up. His eyes found Ruth. Because that woman rode through a mountain pass in the dead of night with nothing but a book and a prayer, and she did what I should have done 8 years ago. She told the truth. He swallowed. I'm tired of lying, Judge. I'm tired. Mercer let the silence hold, then he spoke. Based on the evidence presented, the ledger of Daniel Calloway, the testimony of Mrs. Ruth Calloway, the confession of Willard Spence, and the testimony of Sheriff James Polk, this court finds sufficient cause to issue an arrest warrant for Harlan Briggs on charges of land fraud, contract forgery, criminal coercion, and conspiracy to commit murder. He signed the warrant. The scratch of his pen was the loudest sound in the room. Marshal Tillman, you will proceed to Elk Crossing with a company of deputies and execute this warrant immediately. All properties seized by Mr. Briggs through fraudulent means are hereby frozen pending full review. All labor contracts bearing forged signatures are null and void effective immediately. Ruth's hands covered her mouth. She made a sound, not a word, not a cry, something in between. Something that had been trapped inside her for 6 weeks. Silas reached forward from his chair and put his hand on her shoulder. She reached up and held it. Tight. Her knuckles white against his fingers. Mercer looked at Ruth. Mrs. Calloway, on behalf of this court, I want to say something that probably should have been said to you a long time ago. He removed his spectacles. I'm sorry. The system that was supposed to protect your family failed you. Your husband should be alive. Your children should never have had to run. And the fact that justice required a mother to walk through a desert with 3 children and risk everything that is not justice, that is survival. And I am deeply sorry it came to that. Ruth couldn't speak. She nodded. Tears ran down her face, and she let them. Clara Dunmore was writing so fast her pencil broke. She pulled another from her hair and kept going. Court is adjourned. Tillman moved fast. He rode out within the hour with 6 deputies. Mercer sent a telegram to the territorial governor. Clara Dunmore sent her story to the Helena Independent by evening. By the next morning it would be on the front page. Ruth and Silas stood on the courthouse steps. The sun was setting. Ruth held the ledger in one hand and Daniel's letter in the other. It's over, she said. Then she shook her head. No, it's not. Briggs hasn't been arrested yet. The children are still at Maggie's. It's not over. It will be. When? Soon. Tillman doesn't waste time. Ruth looked at the letter. At Daniel's handwriting. At the words he'd written the night before he died. He knew, she said. He knew they'd kill him, and he wrote this anyway. He made the ledger anyway. He chose the truth even though he knew what it would cost. He was a brave man. He was scared. He told me he was scared, but he did it anyway. She looked at Silas. That's what bravery is, isn't it? Not being fearless, being afraid and doing it anyway. That's exactly what it is. Ruth folded the letter, pressed it against her heart. Then she put it back in her pocket next to the ledger, the 2 halves of Daniel Calloway's legacy side by side. I want to go home, she said. I want to see my children. Then let's ride. They saddled the horses. Mercer gave them fresh supplies, a letter of safe passage bearing his seal, and a warning. Briggs may not go quietly. If Tillman reaches Elk Crossing before you reach Kane's Ranch, you'll be fine. If not, we'll be fine, Judge. Mrs. Calloway, I've learned in 32 years on the bench that the people who say they'll be fine are usually the ones running straight into trouble. Ruth almost smiled. Then at least I'll be running toward my children. They rode south as the stars came out. Back through the foothills. Back toward the mountains, the pass, the ranch, the bunkhouse where 3 children were waiting for their mother to keep her promise. Ruth rode hard. Harder than the ride to Helena. Her body screamed every muscle, every joint, every blister on her hands, but she didn't slow down. Ruth, Silas called. Easy. The horses. My children have been without me for 3 days. I told Jacob 4 days. If I'm late, you won't be late. You don't know that. I know you, Ruth Calloway, and you don't break promises. She slowed, not because he was right, because Nell was stumbling, and a dead horse wouldn't get her home at all. They made camp at the base of the pass. No fire, too risky. They ate cold biscuits from Mercer's Supplies and drank from the canteen. Ruth lay on her bedroll and stared at the sky. You think Briggs will fight? A man like Briggs doesn't know how to lose. He's spent his whole life taking what he wants. When Tillman shows up with that warrant, Briggs won't see justice. He'll see an enemy. And Pike does what Briggs tells him. If Briggs says fight, Pike fights. Could people get hurt? Silas was quiet for a long time. Yes. Ruth closed her eyes. Then we ride faster tomorrow. Ruth. Yeah. Whatever happens in Elk Crossing, whether Briggs fights or folds, it doesn't change what you did. You walked into a federal courtroom and told the truth. You honored your husband. You freed those families. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But it is. She turned on her side and faced him. He was lying on his back, arms crossed, staring up at the stars. Silas. Yeah. When this is over, when Briggs is arrested and the children are safe and the ranch is quiet again, I'm going to need you to do something hard. What's that? Stop punishing yourself for Everett. His breath caught. She could hear it in the dark. You made a choice. It was an impossible choice, and you've spent 15 years making yourself pay for it. But Everett wouldn't want that. A brother who loved you enough to follow you to war wouldn't want you living in a prison you built yourself. You didn't know Everett. I know what it looks like when someone loves their brother. I see it in Jacob every time he picks up Henry, every time he checks on Lily. That fierce, terrified, unbreakable love. She paused. That's what you had with Everett, and that love doesn't turn into punishment unless you force it to. Silas didn't answer. The silence stretched. Ruth thought she'd gone too far. Then so quiet she almost missed it. He said, he used to call me Cy. Nobody else ever called me that, just him. Cy. Don't. Why not? Because if you call me that, I'm going to fall apart, and I can't fall apart right now. You don't have to fall apart, you just have to let someone in. Silence. Long, heavy, full of everything neither of them could say. Good night, Ruth. Good night, Silas. She closed her eyes, slept, and somewhere in the dark, Silas Kane pressed his hand against his chest, where 15 years of grief sat like a stone, and felt it shift. Not disappear, not heal, just shift, just enough to breathe. They broke camp before dawn and rode into the pass. The pass was easier in daylight. The horses moved faster, surer, and Ruth pushed Nell hard through the switchbacks, leaning into every turn, like the mountain was something she could bend with willpower alone. They cleared the ridge by mid-morning. The flatlands spread out below them, and somewhere beyond the horizon sat the ranch, and beyond the ranch sat Maggie's house, and inside Maggie's house sat 3 children who were counting the hours until their mother came home. Ruth was counting too. How far? She asked. 4 hours, maybe 3 if the horses hold. They'll hold. They rode in silence for the next mile. Then Silas pulled up short. Riders. Ruth's hand went to her knife. Where? South. Coming from the direction of town. He squinted. 3 no. 4. Riding fast. Briggs men. Can't tell yet. Ruth's heart hammered. They were in open country. No cover. No walls. If it was Pike, if it was Briggs's hired guns, there was nowhere to run. Silas swung the rifle off his back. Get behind me. Stop telling me to get behind you. Ruth? I didn't ride 2 days through a mountain pass to hide behind a man's back a mile from my children. Give me the revolver. He looked at her. She held out her hand. Steady. He gave her the gun. They waited. The riders closed the distance. Ruth could make out shapes now, hats, badges, tin stars catching the morning light. Badges, Ruth breathed. Tillman. It was. Marshal Tillman, at the front, 3 deputies behind him, and behind them, handcuffed, slumped in his saddle, like a man whose spine had been removed, Harlan Briggs. Ruth's legs went weak. She gripped the saddle horn to keep from sliding off. Tillman pulled up. He tipped his hat. Mrs. Calloway, Mr. Kane, heading home. Ruth couldn't speak. She was staring at Briggs, the man who'd killed her husband, stolen her home, sent armed men after her children. He sat in his saddle with his wrists bound, and he wouldn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, jaw-tight mouth a thin line. "Is it done?" Silas asked. "Done and then some. We rode into Elk Crossing at dawn. Briggs was at his office, didn't even try to run." Tillman's mouth twitched. "Pike did, though. Got about 200 yards before Deputy Collins put a bullet in his horse. Pike's in the Elk Crossing jail. Briggs is headed to Helena for trial." "And the families." Ruth's voice came back. Rough. Cracked. "The 12 families in the ledger. Every contract's been voided. Judge Mercer's orders. The Parkers, the Doyles, the Mendozas, all of them. Free." Tillman paused. "The Doyle family, the ones working the timber operation, their youngest boy ran 3 miles to the general store to tell everyone. By the time we left, half the town was in the street." Ruth closed her eyes. She thought of Daniel, of his careful handwriting in the ledger, of the nights he'd stayed up late, documenting, recording, building a case that no one asked him to build because it was the right thing to do. "You did it," she thought. "Not me. You." "Mrs. Calloway?" She opened her eyes. Briggs was looking at her now. His face had changed. The mask was gone. The charm, the false warmth, the careful smile stripped away. What was left was small. Old. Afraid. "Mrs. Calloway, Don't." Ruth's voice was quiet. Not angry. Something worse than angry. Final. "Don't speak to me. Don't say my name. Don't say my husband's name. You don't get to make this into a moment where you ask for forgiveness, and I give it. You killed my husband. You tried to enslave my children. And the only reason you're sitting in that saddle instead of lying in a ditch is because Daniel Calloway believed in the law more than he believed in revenge." Briggs's mouth opened, closed. He looked away. Tillman watched the exchange with a face like stone. Then he nodded at Silas. "One more thing, Kane. Sheriff Polk resigned his badge this morning. Handed it to me personally. Said to tell Mrs. Calloway he's sorry and he'll testify at the trial, and—" Tillman paused. "He asked me to give you this." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small wooden box. Handed it to Ruth. Ruth opened it. Inside was a badge. Polk's badge. And beneath it a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. Handwritten. Shaky letters. Polk's hand. "Mrs. Calloway, this badge should have protected your family. It didn't. I'm giving it to you because you did what it couldn't. J. Polk." Ruth folded the paper. Put it back in the box. Closed the lid. "Tell him I don't want his badge," she said. "Tell him to give it to someone who'll use it right." Tillman took the box back. "Yes, ma'am." He rode on. The deputies followed. Briggs passed within 10 feet of Ruth. She didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead toward the road south toward her children. When the riders were gone, Silas spoke. "You all right?" "No." She wiped her eyes. "But I will be. Let's go get my kids." They rode hard. 3 hours became 2. Ruth pushed Nell until the mare was lathered, until Silas had to shout at her to slow down, until the rooftops of town came into view, and Ruth's whole body started shaking with something that wasn't fear. Maggie's house, the white fence, the front door. Ruth was off the horse before it stopped moving. Her boots hit the dirt and she ran. She ran up the path and hit the porch steps, and the door flew open, and Jacob was there. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red. Daniel's knife was on his belt. He stood in the doorway like a soldier at a post, and when he saw his mother, his whole face came apart. "Mama!" Ruth grabbed him, pulled him in, held him so tight she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. He was stiff for 1 second, just one, and then he broke. His arms went around her, and he buried his face in her shoulder, and he cried the way a 12-year-old boy cries when he's been trying to be a man for too long. "I'm here," Ruth said. "I'm here. I came back. You promised 4 days. It's been 3.5. I was about to—" I know. "Mama!" Lily came flying out of the house. She hit Ruth at full speed, almost knocking her over, wrapping her arms around Ruth's waist and squeezing with every ounce of her 8-year-old strength. "You came back. You came back. You came back. I told you I would. I know, but I was scared." "Me too, baby. Me too." Then Maggie appeared in the doorway, holding Henry. The boy was half asleep, thumb in his mouth, wooden horse clutched to his chest. He blinked at Ruth. Once. Twice. "Mama." "Hi, baby." He reached for her. She took him from Maggie and pressed her face into his hair and breathed. He smelled like soap and cornbread. Maggie had bathed him, fed him, kept him safe. Ruth looked at Maggie over Henry's head. "Thank you." Maggie waved her hand. "Don't start. You'll make me cry, and I don't cry. It's bad for my reputation." "Your reputation is the reason my children are alive. My reputation is that I'm a mean old woman with a shotgun, and I intend to keep it that way." But her eyes were bright, and she turned away fast. Jacob pulled back from Ruth, wiped his face with his sleeve, straightened up. "Is it over? Did you get to the judge?" "It's over. Briggs is arrested. The warrant's been served. Every family he stole from is free." Jacob stared at her. "Papa's ledger did that. Your papa did that. We just finished what he started." Jacob's hand went to the knife on his belt. He gripped the handle. His father's knife, his father's fight. "Good," he said, and his voice sounded different, lighter, like a weight had lifted off something deep inside him. Silas hung back. He'd tied the horses and stood at the fence, giving Ruth her moment, but Lily spotted him. "Mr. Silas." She broke away from Ruth and ran to the fence. Silas crouched down just in time for Lily to throw her arms around his neck. "You brought her back." "She brought herself back. I just rode next to her." "Are you staying?" "I'm right here, Lily." "No, I mean forever. Are you staying forever?" Silas looked up. Ruth was watching from the porch, Henry on her hip, Jacob beside her, the whole family looking at him, waiting. "I ain't going anywhere," he said. Lily beamed. "Good, because I drew you another picture and it's way better than the first one." Maggie shooed them all inside. She fed them pot roast potatoes, biscuits, the kind of meal that tasted like civilization after weeks of jerky and hardtack. The children ate until they couldn't move. Henry fell asleep in his chair. Jacob ate 3 helpings and then sat back and closed his eyes, and for the first time since Daniel died, he looked like a kid. After supper, Ruth sat on Maggie's porch. The children were inside. She could hear Lily telling Maggie about the ranch, about the horses, about the drawings on the bunkhouse wall. She could hear Jacob asking about the trial, about what would happen to Briggs, about whether the families would get their land back. She could hear Henry snoring. Silas came out and sat beside her. "Maggie says we can stay the night. We should get back to the ranch. Tomorrow. The horses need rest. You need rest." "I'm fine." "You haven't slept in 2 days." "I slept at Mercer's." "For 1 hour. That counts?" "No, it doesn't." She almost laughed. Almost. It came out as a breath, a half sound, the ghost of a laugh. But it was there. "Silas." "Yeah. We won." "We did." "Then why do I feel like crying?" "Because winning doesn't undo what you lost. It just means the losing stops." She looked at him. This man who understood grief the way she did not, as something you got over, but as something you carried. Something that changed shape over time, but never went away. "I want to go home," she said. "To the ranch. Your ranch." "It's not my ranch, Ruth. Hasn't been since the day you showed up." "Whose is it then?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Ours. If you want it to be." Ruth leaned her head against the porch post. "I want it to be." "Then it is." They sat there as the stars came out. Not touching, not speaking, just sitting. And the silence between them was the kind of silence that only exists between two people who've been through something together that words can't hold. They rode home the next morning. All of them. Ruth and Henry on Nell, Jacob and Lily on Bonnie. Silas walked. He said the horses were tired. Ruth knew he was giving the children the ride, because that's who he was. The kind of man who walked so others could rest. Jacob noticed. He didn't say anything, but he watched Silas walk beside the horse, one hand on Bonnie's neck, and something in the boy's face softened. "Mr. Kane?" "Yeah." "You can ride with us. Bonnie can handle 3. "I'm all right." "I know you're all right, but Lily wants to show you her drawing, and she can't do that if you're down there and she's up here." Silas looked up. Lily was holding out a piece of paper, grinning. "It's the ranch," she said. "See, that's the house, that's the barn, that's Bonnie, that's Jacob falling off Bonnie." "I didn't fall off." "You did, twice. 1.5 times." Silas took the drawing. He looked at it for a long time. It was better than the first one. The stick figures had the right number of arms. And in the middle of the picture, standing in front of the house, was a family, a woman, a tall man, 3 children, a horse. "Who's the tall one?" Silas asked. "That's you." "And the woman?" "That's Mama." "And we're all standing in front of the house." "Because that's where we live, together." Lily said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, because to an 8-year-old it was. Silas folded the drawing and put it in his shirt pocket, next to the first one. He cleared his throat. "I'll ride." He swung up behind Lily. She leaned back against him, comfortable, trusting, like she'd been doing it her whole life. Jacob held the reins and said nothing, but the corner of his mouth turned up. Ruth watched from Nell's back. Henry was asleep against her chest. She watched Silas ride with her children, and she felt something she hadn't felt since Daniel was alive. Not safety, not even love. Something deeper. Belonging. The ranch was the same. The house, the barn, the corral, the bunkhouse with Lily's drawings on the wall. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Ruth walked through the house. Silas's house. Sparse, practical, built by a man who didn't expect anyone else to live in it. She touched the kitchen table, the shelf above the stove, the window that faced east. "We need curtains," she said. Silas blinked. "What curtains?" "For the windows. And the bunkhouse needs a new stove. The one in there barely holds heat. And Jacob needs his own room. He's too old to share with Lily and Henry." Ruth. "And we need chickens. You can't run a ranch without chickens. Henry needs eggs in the morning. He's too thin." Silas stared at her. She was standing in his kitchen listing renovations, planning a future in a house she'd stumbled into half dead 3 weeks ago. "You're serious?" "Silas Kane, I have walked through a desert, ridden through a mountain pass, testified before a federal judge, and faced down the man who killed my husband. I am very, very serious about curtains." He laughed. Actually laughed. Out loud. A real laugh, full and rough and startled, like he'd forgotten his body could make that sound. Ruth stared at him, and then she started laughing too, and they stood in his kitchen, laughing like fools, while 3 children watched from the doorway with their mouths open. "Mama's laughing," Lily whispered. "Mr. Kane's laughing," Jacob whispered back. Henry looked up from his wooden horse. "Everybody's happy." "Yeah, baby," Jacob said. I think everybody's happy. The weeks that followed were quiet. Not the silence of solitude, the quiet of healing. The ranch filled with sounds it hadn't known in 15 years. Children's voices. Ruth's singing she sang while she cooked low and sweet the same songs Daniel used to love. The hammer of Jacob mending fences. Lily's chatter. Henry's laughter. Silas built Jacob a room, added it onto the side of the main house. Nothing fancy, 4 walls, a bed, a window. But it was Jacob's. His own space. His own door. When the boy saw it, he didn't speak for a full minute. You built this, Jacob said. You need your own room. A man needs his own space. You called me a man. Didn't I? Jacob ran his hand along the door frame, touched the hinges, tested the latch. Thank you, he said. And it was the first time he'd said those words to Silas without it sounding like it cost him something. Lily got her paint. Ruth traded 6 jars of preserves at the general store for a set of watercolors and 3 brushes. Lily spent a week covering the bunkhouse wall with a mural so wild and colorful that Maggie rode out from town specifically to see it. Lord have mercy, Maggie said. That child's got a gift. She gets it from her father, Ruth said. She gets the talent from her father. The stubbornness is all you. Henry grew. He stopped asking for Papa every night. Not because he forgot, because he found something new to hold on to. Every morning he followed Silas to the barn. Every morning Silas showed him something: how to brush a horse, how to check a hoof, how to fill the water trough without making a mess. Small things, patient things. The kind of things a father teaches a son. One morning, Henry looked up at Silas and said, "Can I call you Papa Silas?" The barn went quiet. Even the horses seemed to stop. Silas crouched down, eye level with the boy. "You've got a Papa, Henry, a real good one. He's watching over you right now." "I know, but he's in heaven, and you're here." "I am. So can I have 2? Silas looked at the boy, 4 years old, wooden horse in one hand, the other hand reaching for Silas's finger the way he'd done that first day in the barn. That small, warm grip that had shattered everything. "Yeah," Silas said. His voice was rough, broken, rebuilt. "You can have 2. Henry grabbed his finger, held on tight. "Okay, Papa Silas." Silas pressed his free hand against his eyes. His shoulders shook. Henry didn't let go. Ruth found them like that. She stood in the barn doorway, the same doorway where she'd watched him cry the first time, and she pressed her hand against her heart and let the tears come. That evening after supper, after the children were in bed, Ruth and Silas sat on the porch. The sky was enormous, the kind of sky that makes everything else small. "Silas." "Yeah. I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." He turned to face her. "Daniel was the love of my life. He gave me 3 children and 10 good years and a heart full of memories I wouldn't trade for anything. And losing him broke something in me that I don't think will ever fully heal." Silas nodded, listening. "But you put me back together. Not whole, not the way I was before. Different, stronger in some places, still cracked in others, but standing. And I need you to know that I'm not looking for someone to replace Daniel. Nobody could. I'm looking for someone to stand next to." She reached for his hand. He gave it. "You're not a replacement, Silas. You're not a second choice. You're a whole new thing. And I choose you. Not because I'm lonely. Not because I'm desperate. Because you carried my son when you didn't have to. Because you taught my boy to ride. Because you let my daughter hug you even though it terrified you. Because you sat on this porch every night with a rifle watching the dark for people who might hurt us." Her voice cracked. She let it. "I choose you because you chose us first. Before you knew our names. Before you knew our story. You looked at a woman and 3 children dying in your yard and you said, 'I'll take all of you.' And you meant it." Silas's hand tightened on hers. His jaw was clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. His eyes were wet. "I don't deserve this," he said. "That's not your decision to make." "Ruth, I couldn't save my brother. I couldn't. You saved my children. You saved me. And Everett." She squeezed his hand. "Everett would have loved you for it. You know he would." Silas broke. Not the way he'd broken in the barn, private, silent, alone. This time Ruth was there. She pulled him close. His forehead pressed against her shoulder, and he shook. 15 years of grief. 15 years of punishment. 15 years of sitting alone on a porch watching the dark because he didn't believe he deserved the light. Ruth held him, the way she held her children, the way Daniel used to hold her, with everything she had and nothing held back. When he pulled away, his face was wrecked, red-eyed, raw, and more honest than she'd ever seen it. "I love you," he said, like a confession, like a prayer, like a man saying something he'd known for weeks but couldn't find the courage to speak. "I know," Ruth said. "I've known since you carried Henry to the house that first day. You held him like he was yours. He is mine. They all are. If you'll let me. I already have." He kissed her, gentle, careful. The way a man kisses a woman when he knows exactly how fragile the moment is and how much it costs them both to be this open. Ruth kissed him back. Not careful. Sure. Full of everything words couldn't hold. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his. No more sitting on the porch alone. No more. No more watching the dark. No more. "Promise me." "I promise, Ruth." She believed him, not because promises were easy, but because this man had proven every word he'd ever spoken with action. He'd fought for her children before he loved her. He'd given them a home before he gave them his heart. Everything he did backwards, deed first, words after. And that was worth more than every pretty speech she'd ever heard. They married in the fall, under a cottonwood tree near the corral, the one where Ruth liked to sit and watch the children ride. Maggie performed the ceremony. She wasn't a preacher, but she was the closest thing the territory had to one, and nobody argued with Maggie. Jacob stood next to Silas. Not as best man, he wouldn't have accepted the title, but as witness. As the boy who'd carried his baby brother across the prairie and learned to shoot a revolver and stood in a doorway with a knife ready to fight the world. He wore Daniel's knife on his belt. He'd wear it the rest of his life. Lily threw wildflowers. Too many. They got in everyone's hair, and Maggie spent 10 minutes picking them out of her collar, complaining the whole time. Henry stood between Ruth and Silas during the vows. He held both their hands, one in each, and when Maggie said, "You may kiss the bride," Henry tugged on Silas's hand and said, "Kiss her, Papa Silas." Silas kissed her, and the children cheered, and Maggie wiped her eyes and said, "I am not crying, this is allergies." The ledger went to the Territorial Archive. Judge Mercer saw to it personally. Every family Daniel Calloway had documented received their land back. Briggs was convicted on 12 counts of fraud, 3 counts of coercion, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. He died in prison 2 years later. Polk testified at the trial, served 6 months for his role, then left Montana. Ruth never saw him again. Clara Dunmore's article in the Helena Independent was reprinted in newspapers across the territory. Daniel Calloway's name was cleared. The saddle shop was returned to Ruth. She sold it to a young couple from Missouri and used the money to buy chickens, a new stove, and enough paint to keep Lily busy for years. Jacob grew tall. He worked the ranch beside Silas and learned every skill the man had, ran farrier, workhorse, breaking, fence building. He never called Silas Papa. He called him Sir, the way his father taught him to address a man he respected. That was enough, for both of them. Lily painted. She covered every wall within reach, and most that weren't. By the time she was 12, a gallery owner from Denver saw her work and offered to display it. She said yes, but she never left the ranch for long. She said the light was better there. Henry grew into a boy who laughed easily and loved fiercely and carried a wooden horse long past the age when other children would have set it aside. He set it on the mantel the day he turned 8, right next to Lily's first drawing of the family. And Ruth Calloway Kane planted a garden. She planted tomatoes and herbs and sunflowers tall enough to see from the road. She cooked meals that filled the house with warmth. She sat on the porch in the evenings with Silas's hand in hers and watched her children become the people Daniel would have been proud of. One evening years later, Henry sat beside Silas on the porch. He was 9, long-legged, sunburned, quick to smile. The wooden horse was on the mantel inside, but its memory lived in the boy's hands. Hands that were already learning to carve, to build, to create. Daniel's hands, in a new body, making new things. Papa Silas. Yeah, son. Do you ever miss being alone? Silas looked at the ranch. At Jacob hauling water from the well. At Lily on the fence painting the sunset. At Ruth in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on her apron, watching them all with a face full of the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything because it already has everything it needs. Not for one single second. Henry leaned against him. Silas put his arm around the boy. Ruth walked out and sat beside them. Lily ran over and squeezed in. Jacob saw them from across the yard, shook his head like he was too old for this, and then walked over and sat on the step below his back, against his mother's knees. 5 people, 1 porch, 1 family. Not born, chosen. Ruth rested her head on Silas's shoulder and spoke quiet enough that only he could hear. Daniel would have liked you. Silas's arm tightened around Henry. His voice was rough. I would have liked him too. He sent us to you. I believe that. I don't care if it's crazy. He sent us. Silas kissed the top of her head. Then I owe him everything. You owe him nothing. Just love his children. Our children. Ruth smiled. Our children. The sun went down. The family stayed on the porch. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling because it's already full. And Silas Kane, the man who'd spent 15 years believing he didn't deserve a family who'd built a ranch in the middle of nowhere and filled it with silence, because silence was safer than love, sat in the center of everything he'd ever wanted and realized the simplest truth he'd ever known. You don't find family. You don't earn it. You don't deserve it or not deserve it. You just open the door when it shows up half dead in your yard and you say, I'll take all of you. And you mean it. And you spend the rest of your life being glad you did. If this story touched your heart, type family in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because stories like this, stories about hope, about courage, about the kind of love that doesn't give up, that's what we do here. Every single week. See you in the next one.